Good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have, what kind of car do we have?
Toyota Corolla.
We have a Toyota Corolla, like he said. This is a car that you guys are gonna just love because, well, the installation was done like crap. And that means we get to tear it all out and start over. But this brings up an interesting point, Fernando. Stop moving for a second. We call these 911s.
Yeah.
I really feel they should be called something else.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, it's easy. People get the gist of it. Like, hey, it's an emergency. Not really. I feel like we should call them something else. How do you feel about that?
I like 911.
You like 911?
Yeah.
Well, if you guys have a different name that you'd like us to call them other than 911s, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, we'll just keep calling them 911s. And, well, let's get to it.
Let's get to the rescue.
Let's see what's going on in this thing. Anytime you start one of these, the first thing you want to do is head up underneath the hood and disconnect the power wire, because you're going to be working in the back, doing all kinds of fun and excitement. You're pulling stuff apart. You might not be thinking about neatness or anything. You just want to get the garbage out of the car. Underneath the hood here, we have the fuse holder that is zip tied to a relay, and then we have all these little red wires here. I don't know what this is. There's no fuse on any of this, so that's bizarre. Got a lot of zip ties going on in here. This feels like CCA.
Oh, totally CCA.
It feels totally. And I know what you're thinking. How can you tell the difference between what CCA and copper feels like just by squeezing the wire? I've felt enough CCA wire to know what it feels like. It just has this feeling to it that. Oh, I wonder if it'll just pull out. Bet you it pulls out. Bet you it pulls out. Oh no. Is it? Oh.
No,
it's like, good crimp. I mean, it's not a great crimp, but it's not in there pretty well.
But you still we have plenty wire outside.
You really don't want to do a crimp like this. Ah!
Ha! That was funny.
With the power wire disconnected, now we're free to do whatever we need to get the amount of stuff that's in here out. Now, not all these 911s are like total straight up emergencies. Some of them are just, they don't like the way they're installed and they would like it installed better. And some of them, if you guys have seen in the past, are straight up like it's amazing the car's still on the road and hasn't burst into flames. I don't know. You guys have to rate what you think as far as the necessary evil between what's good, bad, and indifferent. This one, he's got a bunch of, well, let me just show you. One of the first things we do after disconnecting the battery is pull the back seat out so we can see all the wiring that is underneath it. And this one, of course, is not going to disappoint. You have a whole bunch of stuff going on here. This one in particular, this scenario right here is the one that I don't like, and this is why I tell people not to run the wires underneath the seats. It just gets melted into this goo, the seat sits on it. All that pressure from the seat is smashing down into these wires. Have your power wire just chilling out over there. And look at this, a bunch of goo on that where that's getting smashed into the bottom of the car from the seat sitting on top of it. It didn't come through the panel right, and that's just smashed down on it. That's like, oh. And then we fold the seats down. Okay, mounted to the back of the seats. It's really not the best place for it, but don't get me wrong, over the years and years of doing this, I've mounted plenty of amps to the back of seats. It's just not something I do anymore. But I always liked this, cutting the holes and trying to hide, you know, what is all this? And then that's screwed down? No. Alright, so there's your power distribution, not screwed down, grounded to the seat frame rail right there. Looks like they actually scraped the paint away.
Yeah, probably.
All this is located right here at the hinge of the seat. This stuff has to move.
Yeah.
You know, power wire isn't supposed to move. Like, there's no place in your car other than the boot, and if maybe here, that power wire moves. It's not made to move. And even in the boot, it is specifically designed that way. This is definitely not specifically designed to move.
I like it.
Oh yeah, that's the T-spec. I like that one. Yes.
It's like dual power.
Yes.
So where is the jumper between here and here?
It's on the input.
It's in here?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the T-spec. That's pretty cool.
That's
I
pretty
like that
neat.
one.
Yep. I like it.
They make a 2 and a 4, I think. Oh, it looks like there's screws rolling around like it was originally screwed to that cardboard cover there.
Yeah, right here.
Because
right
the
here.
car moves and the wire moves, it probably pulled itself free. Good stuff. The first step is to pull all of this out. We're gonna pull every piece of wire out of this car. We're gonna pull the rear deck out. We're gonna pull the doors off. We're gonna go to every single facet of this, except for one thing we don't have to rewire is the radio. And the reason for that is we actually installed the radio. That's why it's back having us fix all this stuff now, because after having the conversation with him about everything else, he was like, yeah, I need to just start over, which is cool. We will be pulling the radio out, but not for the purpose of fixing anything behind it. So let's get going, unscrewing these wires and start digging into the mystery of what this car has. The rear deck are a nice set of JL Audios. You guessed it right here. There's a giant gap. There's no screw there. This is what we call the 3-screw option. The wire is just kind of like snaked up and around and down and just doing what it does.
It's another right here.
Oh yeah, it looks like maybe they had a high level to low level at one point, or they just felt like they needed to rerun their wires. Yeah, there's another one right here. What is that hooked up to?
This one goes to, I have no idea.
This one, as you can see, we got some self-tappers at strange angles just holding this in. And the problem with doing this, put a screw in it like this angle with a big head like that, you could actually tear the surround of the speaker. And yep, there's your no screw on this end. They make brackets for this. Is the factory screw hole here. One of the problems he was having with the rear speakers, as you could see, the wiring was not done properly through the bars. These move and they were just kind of draping over it, and on this side they actually went between it here and were getting pulled every time he'd open and close the trunk. This wasn't coming out because there was a piece of sound treatment right here holding this wire in place. These weren't even hooked up to anything, they were just chilling out back here. That's why cutters are your friend when disassembling a car like this. There's a point during every single one of these where you just kind of scratch your head and go, what happened? What was the thought process here? The corner of the car here, this is the glove box where the RCAs all converge and manage to go into behind the radio. This is kind of weird. So there's 3 RCAs. The gold RCA here goes up and around this power harness in the back here and up and above the air conditioner and into the dash. Blue one here, I don't know where this one goes, but it kind of disappears up into the dash over in here, and it feels like it goes above the airbag to get into it. And then there's this gray one that goes off in that direction. So all 3 RCAs are going in a different direction to get to the head unit. I don't know why you would do that. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I could see it making sense if you were doing 2 different things, like you did like a sub amp and then you came back and did the highs amp. That's a possibility, I guess. And that's what I'm saying. It's one of those times where you go, I wonder what was going on during this. That's kind of weird. Whatever. Pulled off the side panel, and sure enough, here's the blue one, and then here's that gray one going up into above the dash. This one comes through this area here, and this one comes through that area. We're also concerned with the fact that the boot is not in place. That ought to be neat. And then I have this silver wire here that seems to be going into the boot. Fernando asked me to come look on his side. Ooh.
Really? Like,
this is the screw cover, and it apparently broke, so there's just a big ball of strip caulk in there. We'll have to, oh yeah, you can smell it. We're gonna have to pull that out to get to our
you
screw.
don't have to put like 2 pounds of...
Don't want it to fall out, man. With the door panel off, we can get a better idea of what's going on. Here's the boot. Wire just pulled through it. Pretty sure water's getting into the car here. That's wonderful. The speaker is mounted to the existing factory speaker. They just pulled that out. I'll show you what I mean. 3 screws, drywall, pull it out. No terminals on the speaker itself. They're just wires twisted in. These are some more JL C1s. This wire just randomly goes into here, and then this is the wire that is run into the door. we'll have to fix the boot. Go in and just pull this wire all the way out. What we have, you can see where the metal from the boot has been rubbing on this and will eventually just cut through it. Actually, it has already cut through it. One is cut through and the wire is exposed, so this was shorting out in the door already. If it wasn't, the only thing stopping it was the paint open wiring right there. And this is crappy copper wire. You can already see where it's corroding in the harness. Not all copper wire is created equal, guys. And yeah, you already have the green corrosion going on in here. To get these speakers out, you just have to drill the rivets, and Metra does make an adapter that allows you to put the right speaker in the door and not have to destroy this. Now that factory speaker is gone. If you ever did want to sell this car, put it back to factory or anything along those lines, he ain't doing it. Fernando thinks he's figured out why they ran their own wiring into it and had such a disastrous response, and that has to do with the Toyota tweeter. It's a jumper. Let me show you what I mean. When you have this harness here that is for the factory tweeter or the factory mid-range up in the dash, you'll see the 4 wires. How it works, inside of this is a jumper. There's a parallel here and a parallel here. So it comes in, goes to the tweeter, and loops out back down to the mid-range down there. If you don't hook this back up or properly install your tweeter, then that wire has no sound. The tweeter wire will. His thought is that this wasn't connected and that was causing the issue. And that's why they decided to tear it all apart and run all new wiring instead of figuring out why it just didn't work in the first place. Right. This door is done the same way. Just has random wiring ran and the speakers screwed up, and yeah, more pinched copper. Yay! A lot of times when we're done with something like this, it's a mess. There's zip ties everywhere, random screws. Hitting the car up with a quick vacuum just to get the debris out is a great idea. We got everything out? So this is what we call the 0 point. We've taken everything out of the car. We know what we're dealing with now. Doors are off. The boots have been put back in place. We like to do this at the beginning, meaning get as much stuff back to factory as possible. We've removed the factory speakers, drilled out the rivets. We're at a great point now to start. All the zip ties are gone. The new location for the amplifier is going to be underneath the seat. So we took all this out, vacuumed this whole area, got all the debris out of there. There's nothing happening in the rear doors, so we don't have to deal with that. Vacuumed this whole area, vacuumed underneath the back seat, got all of that cleaned up, removed all the excess wiring that was back here in the rear deck, so all of that is gone now. There's nothing back here except for a random iPod cable. Sorry, Android cable. And we've put everything that we've taken out of the car into a pile. None of this is going to get reused, except for maybe the distribution block if we needed it. But the rest of it is just garbage. But we give it all back to the customer because they might have a friend that needs to do some work. I don't know. They get it all back. We've had plenty of people that go, I'm going to go throw it at the guy that, yeah, whatever. Don't do any of that. Just chalk it up to bad luck and move on from there. This is one of the reasons why when we take a job like this, we have to pull everything out of the car. Sometimes people call them and say, no, it's done. I just need to do this. And it's like, no, it's not done. We need to do this. And they're like, oh my gosh. And there again, we can't see what's behind the panels until we get the panels off. And we don't know what's wrong with it, and we can't figure it out until we get it all apart and get it back to this factory 0 point here. The dash is also apart now. We pulled the radio out. This is the RR2 harness. It's all zip tied and taped up. We'll be redoing this for our amplifier. We are going to be using the factory wiring that's there. All the RCAs are out. So everything is in a good spot. The next step will be headed over next door, grabbing the appropriate speaker brackets so we can get those mounted into place. And I'm going to start building our new amp rack, which we're going to go with 1 amplifier now instead of 2. That means let's head over to the bench and take a look at all the parts we need in order to do this installation. To figure out what adapters we need, we went to metraonline.com, typed in our make, model, and year, scrolled down to where it said brackets. There's a 6x9 bracket for the rear, a 6.5 bracket for the front.
In the front doors, he has a set of coaxials and the factory tweeter. The factory tweeter actually still works, so we'll be connecting that back in. And these are the JLC1s. 650. Decent size magnet, stamped steel frame. It is a biampable speaker in that the tweeter wires run up here through the center, so if you did want to go full active on these, you could. Aluminum tweeter here on the top. The cone is made out of some form of a plastic, and it has a rubber surround. Seems like a pretty nice speaker speaker for the money. This is their entry-level speaker system. It's pretty nice. To mount these into the doors, we are going to be using the Metra 828148s. This is a Toyota universal fit speaker, and that it'll take different size speakers. For us, we need to remove these brackets here. To do that, grab a pair of duckbills and twist up, and they'll pop right off. This is the size hole we need. Place these on the door and make sure that all these screw holes do line up.
Just rotate it around until you find the correct hole pattern. And that would be it there, with these two little extra legs sticking out on the sides like that. This is in fact the bracket that we will be using.
Just like the inside brackets, you can snap these off. And this is what the factory speaker would have looked like. You'll also notice it has this little hole here. This is for where the wire is going to come through. We can take our JL, line it up onto here. There are some holes to screw this in, and that will get us what we need. The next step that we have to do to this is apply some foam to the front and back. The reason for the foam is this is going to go onto a piece of metal. You need a good insulation between the plastic and the metal to reduce vibration, and also to keep any moisture out of the inside of the door leaking into the car. The same is true for the front. You have a metal speaker bracket and a plastic panel. This will give us a nice tight gasket for around the speaker to get into the car. To mount these into the car, because they used rivets, we're going to use some Nutserts. So let's take a look at those.
This is a Nutsert. As you can see here, there's some threads inside of it that this screw will screw into. You'll also see these lines here. These are the crumple zone. It works very similar to a rivet in that this goes into a hole and then it gets pulled tight, and when this expands, it locks it into place. The first step is to drill out the previous rivet hole to the right size. A step bit is the best way to do that. The tool has a threaded end, the same thread count as the screw you're going to use. Thread on the Nutsert. Insert it into the hole and squeeze. And on the back side, there is a handle that you twist to unthread it.
The advantage of doing it this way is now we have a permanent thread in the door that we can take in and out as many times as we want. It'll just come in and out. If we did have the factory speakers, we could easily screw those back into place. Or if we need to service this one, we can unscrew it and screw it back in. With all three rivets in place, we can screw the bracket in. Next step is to get the speaker screwed into the bracket. Using 1/2-inch small head screws, not the big heads that they were using. That way it doesn't twist up or bind into the basket. We've also added a pigtail onto the back of the speaker with male and female bullet connectors to plug into our factory wiring with the corresponding heat shrink. And that finishes up the speaker the way we would install it. We can get the door panel back on now. The rear speaker is the 6x9 version of the front speaker. Rubber surround, metal tweeter, decent sized magnet in the back. Tweeter wire runs out, bi-ampable if necessary. Fortunately, we don't have the Metra brackets for the rear. We're just out of stock on them. It happens. We've actually made panels previous, meaning before Metra even decided to make a set, we designed our own. Let's take these over to the router and cut out 2 1/4-inch thick panels so we can get these into our rear deck. We have our first 2, stack them on top of one another. If you've ever seen us cut one of these out before, you'll notice there's no hole in the center for a speaker. Depending on what speaker they have, we can make our hole to match. If they had a set of 6.5, cut a 6.5-inch hole in here. If they have 6x9s, we'll cut a 6x9, 5x7, 4-inch. It really doesn't matter. That just makes it easier for us. And that means the next step for this is use one of our 6x9 hole guides and put a 6x9-inch hole in here. Make sure when applying something like this that you're going to router out the center, you remove all the tape from the inside of it. Otherwise it's going to get gummed up on your bearings and it'll wear out your bit faster. And these are our adapters that we'll be using for the rear. We have 2 6x9 mounts. That way we won't get gaps and whatnot.
We'll apply the same foam that we did to the front to these, both sides, front and back. With our brackets, you can see this is a much nicer install than it was when it showed up. There's also not a bunch of random wiring just hanging out and getting in the way. Let's take a look from the back. Just like the factory would have it, it comes through. There's not a bunch of wire hanging on. There's nothing that's gonna get caught in these trunk bars. The same is the case on this side. We don't have to worry about the trunk opening and closing. In case you're wondering how the wire gets through to the speaker, when we routed it out, you saw there was that one little pigtail. That's the factory clip when we first made it. That's the factory clip hole. There's actually a spot in the metal for the wire to come through. That's why you see it coming through on that side as well as over here on this side. The speaker is not sitting on top of that wiring. With the speakers in and the amp going underneath the front seat, we can put the whole back of the car back together now. We're done back there. We don't have to deal with anything except for this one little run right here. The reason why we don't want to put that back together yet is because that's where the subwoofer wire is going to run through. Why we have the car all apart is a great time to answer one of the questions you guys ask a lot, and that is, where do we ground the amplifier when we put it underneath the seat? Let me show you. In most cars, there's going to be some form of factory ground either located here or over here in the B pillar. In this case, the ground happens to be located here in the B pillar. It's a very short run from where the amplifier is going to be, which is located right here. In most newer cars, when you pull up on the carpet here, you'll find there's some form of a factory ground located on this. But as you'll see, there's also a bunch of holes located here and whatnot. And some of these are empty thread holes. Don't give up looking, just kind of feel your way around. Now, if you don't have a factory ground bolt here, you don't have a factory ground bolt here, then I would definitely make my ground somewhere in this location. The other thing too you'll find is that there's a factory ground located right here as well, which isn't a really long run either from where we're going to be putting the amplifier. So there's 3 really good ground locations to choose from. Sometimes also, as a fourth bonus, is there'll be a ground location up underneath your center console. Don't be afraid to pull up your cup holder and check there. The new amplifier we're going to go with to power this system is the Exelon XR 901.5 5-channel amplifier. If we flip it over onto the back, we can kind of get a good idea of how much power it is. Looking at 75 watts by 4 and 600 watts by 1 at 2 ohm. 4 ohm for the front. Has a low pass or high pass crossover. It has a low pass crossover for the subwoofer, 24 dB, variable between 50 and 200 hertz, and high pass crossovers front and rear, variable between 50 and 200 hertz at 12 dB. There is also a 0 to 18 dB bass boost at 40 hertz. It has high level or low level inputs, and it is high res compatible. Opening the amplifier up, located in the small box here in the front is the bass knob along with the cable for the bass knob. There is an instruction manual located inside. Also inside of that is a parts bag with the screw and washer for the bass knob if you're going to flush mount it, and a set of long Allen keys. These are really nice because the way the amplifier is designed, they get down inside of it, and if you're doing any work like under a seat or something like that where you can't have a tall Allen key, they're very helpful. Taking a look at the top of the amplifier, with the smaller of the 2 Allen keys, remove the 2 screws. This will gain us access to our screw downs. I like to put the screws back in the amplifier, that way when I'm done I know where they're at, and the small little metal piece I'll put back in the box. On the connector side of the amplifier, we have 3 40 amp fuses, 4 gauge input for power, ground, remote is in the center, positive, negative, negative, positive, channel A input. It is bridgeable using left positive, right negative. Channel B input is next, positive, negative, negative, positive. You can also bridge that channel as well. And your sub input, RCA's front rear sub, and then there's a small switch here for your subwoofer input, either A, B, or sub. That means if you didn't have a subwoofer output from your radio or source unit and you just wanted to feed it off of A and B, you can. In this case, we have a 6-channel preamp output radio. We're going to leave it for the factory setting of subwoofer input. Looking at the other side of the amplifier, you'll notice there's a giant fan here to keep this thing cool. Channel A, channel B, and subwoofer gain controls are located here, variable between 5 and 0.2 volts.
Subwoofer bass knob control input is located on this side of the amplifier. Bass boost comes up next, along with the subwoofer crossover. It is default subwoofer, high pass front, high pass rear, and the on-off switch for high pass. These channels out of the amplifier are only available for high pass. They do not have a low pass crossover available to them. We do have a decent amount of room up underneath the driver's front seat, which is where I want to put this. Let's head into the car, set this in place, and get some measurements for our mount.
Our amplifier fits under here with plenty of clearance between the bottom of the seat and the top of the amplifier. Normally when we build one of these, we try to use seat positions in order to sandwich our amp rack into place. However, that's not going to happen in this one just by the way it's designed. It's kind of unique, kind of weird. It means we'll have to come up with a little bit different way to mount this. The nice thing about this particular car is that just like this here is a tube structure that doesn't go to the outside of the car to hold this, there's another tube structure in the back here that does the same thing. This isn't the outside of the car. That means we can drill into this, put some Nutserts here, and do the same thing we're doing in the doors, but do it to hold the amplifier in place. If we do it that way, a 12 by 12 piece of plastic is all we'll need. A perfect square. So we'll be using a piece of 1/4 inch ABS, and this is our 12 by 12 piece with our holes drilled in it already. It'll slide into place. I have a silver Sharpie that'll allow me to mark the carpet where I need to drill my holes for this to mount into place. I made a small U-cut here so I could fold the carpet underneath. That way if I ever needed to, I can unfold it back up and cover the hole. There's one here and there. Thread on my Nutsert. Make sure you get it as flat into the hole as possible. You need the ribbed area to be down, otherwise they won't go in and the thing will just fall out like this one did here. I didn't get it pushed down enough because I was talking. This is what a compressed one will look like. With both the Nutserts in place, I can test fit my amp rack. Right now I'm just using silver screws just to make sure that it screws into place. When I'm done, I'll switch these out for some black screws so that they'll blend in and look normal. But that's it, what I'm going for. Let's head over to the bench and start getting the amplifier wired up into place.
I mounted the amplifier to the ABS bracket. Anytime you're going to mount or screw into ABS or plastic, always pre-drill your holes. Otherwise it'll just strip. Signal and speaker wires are gonna come this way. Power is going to go that way. I know they don't ask us when we design these amplifiers which way to run things. I'm going to bring in my speaker wires close to the amplifier as possible, followed by my RCAs as close to those. That way I can bring my power wire out this way. Inside the car there is a hole here. I'm just going to bring this straight out and it can turn. These will just run and go up into the car over here. I've prepped my wire. For this we'll be using speed wire. It's going to set right here. I'll be using my wire ruler to drill my holes along the route. I need to stop here at the fuse. This will be my last hole. There's 5 holes I need to drill. I'm going to keep this tight against the amplifier. Because of the thickness of the speed wire here, these 3 holes are the first ones I'm going to drill. Then move these back further, compensate for that thicker wire. I've used shrink wrap to stagger my wiring. B channel is longer than A channel and the remote is shorter than that. And I have the shrink wrap I lined up with the divider. First wire I'm going to terminate is my remote turn on. We use wire ferrules on the ends of our wire along with some colored heat shrink. With the first wire in, I can add in my end zip ties here, lining it up into place and pulling it tight. And that allows me to add in the next group of wires down, moving this way. Make sure if you're gonna go that way that your wires are long enough here at the end. Some cases it makes more sense to start at this and move this way to make sure that you have enough length. All our speaker wires and remote turn on are in place. The sub wire is next in order. However, I'm going to skip that and move to the RCAs. I've prepped the end of our 4000 series Stinger RCAs with color coded shrink wrap as well as some tape. Front is first, followed by rear and then subwoofer. I want to line these up with the speaker wires, but I am going to come away from them some because of the way this staggered. Seems like the spot I want. Move it down and add my next row. Some materials like ABS are pretty thick and hard to go through. On the softer material, it's really easy to just go all the way through the wire ruler and out to the other side. When doing something thick like 1/4 inch ABS or some 1/2 inch, it's easier just to score where you want your holes to be, then go back in and finish up. I like to put in my first couple zip ties, but not pull them tight. That way I can line up the wire. With your RCAs, you don't want to pull them super tight. I like to start with my farthest one and add a little bit of a loop here to it, and then pull the rest of them through to line it up with that. The reason for that, if I need to remove these, I want to have some give. Once I have it the way I want it, put my finger on it to hold it tight and pull my zip tie. There's a lot of zip ties that are going to be on here. They don't have to be like Superman tight, just tight enough to where the wire isn't going to move around. RCA run is done. Before I get too carried away with the rest of this, because these are short, these are only 6 foot lengths, and the next are going to be longer, I want to get my subwoofer wire plugged in and zip tied into place. And that is going to come around here, zip tie, and go out to the front this way. This is pretty straightforward. I'll use the wire ruler, put it up against the side of the amplifier like this, drill my holes. I just need to come all the way straight down with it. Base knob is zip tied in place and ran. I'm gonna go back now and put in the subwoofer wire. And for that, we use a dual 12 gauge, meaning it's a red and a black. It's not one piece of wire. We sleeve it and then put the corresponding heat shrink and ferrules on the end. I like doing 2 pieces. It makes it a little bit more flexible. Line up the wire in place, add a little S-bend here to it, mark where I want my first hole, and this is just going to be 4 holes, 2 zip ties. Get those zip ties in loose, adjust this, and then pull them tight. If I turn it to the side, you see that S-bend that I was talking about, and that leaves just the power and ground that are over here. Same braided loom, ferrules. And that finishes up the amplifier. One other piece that I added was here at the back. I added in a piece of 1/4 inch that I heated into an S-bend to cover up the bass knob so that if it gets kicked or stepped on or anything like that, it won't break. But let's take a closer look at the wiring.
The amplifier slid in nicely like we knew it would, and as you can see, we went with the black screws. You can't even notice they're there. And with the amp in, I've also ran the wires into those holes I was talking about, but they're not going anywhere. So the next step is to get the power wire out, the RCAs into the dash. Fernando's working on the fuse holder underneath the hood. When he's done with that, we'll almost be ready to turn it on. From the front side, the amplifier and all the wiring are now in place. We ended up using that ground point here that we showed you earlier. The wire that came with the kit was the perfect length. When running the wires along here, you don't want to come this way because this is the metal frame rail. There's actually an access here. There's a hump in the carpet where the factory wiring comes up. Try to run your wires with existing wiring. In this case, the wire came around this way underneath the carpet and then loops back up and runs along here up into the firewall. The signal and RCA wires are zip tied up and come into this hole up into the center console where we mounted the bass knob and the factory knockout. Another good place would have been here, but as you can see, it already has 2 switches there. The next step, I need to remove the harness that we made previously. We have to prep the ends for our speed wire. So join me over on the bench.
When we installed this originally, we had taken out an existing head deck. That head deck, the way it was installed, is they did the loop trick. So we had to do that as well. What you're looking at here is the 2 speaker plugs. This is the rear speaker, this is the front speaker, and they're connected together. I'm not a fan of this. This is just utter, like, I know there are guys that do it, whatever, you get my idea. The idea is that you can run the front speaker off of the rear speaker. So if you're putting an amp in the back of the car, you connect new wires up to the rear speakers, you run a second set of wires up to the factory wiring. That goes up front, you loop the rear wiring into the front wiring, and then out of the front wiring it goes into the 2 doors. That way you don't have to run those extra 2 wires up front to this point. Wire's wire, so I can understand why somebody would do it. It seems kind of weird. I'm not a fan of it. All I have to do now though is remove this tape, cut these 2 harnesses, and this will be prepped to go into the car for us to connect our speed wire to. The remote turn-on wire was already external because of the previous install. The reason why we like to use exterior Tesa tape is it doesn't get as sticky as the interior stuff, and it's way more rigid. You have to cut it with scissors. It will easily peel off of this for us, and that gets us access to our 2 solder points. We can remove this and we're back in business. We can hop into the car. And there it is. There is the fuse holder all connected and into place. What he's done is made this nice display panel here. This is a secondary bolt that will come off if you need to remove this to get to the battery. The other nice thing is too is these unsnap from this holder, so you do not need to remove the wire or any of that. You just can simply remove this piece, change the battery out, put it all back together, snap the fuse in place. Speaker wire, remote turn on are now connected. All the other wiring here is done. The new RCAs are right here. Fernando also reran the Sirius XM wire. If you remember, I don't know if I talked about it, I was tripping over it over here on the side of the car. They had ran it up through this. There was a bunch of random zip ties. He put it into the loom, zip tied it all up to the factory side of the car, and we ran it up here along with the rest of our wiring when we had this apart and got that into the dash. I'm gonna plug my radio in so we can get on to testing polarities, setting up our gains, and doing all that so we can get this thing done and get it out of here. Dash is back together. We're playing some pink noise from our Educar Test and Tune app. You can get this on the App Store. The reason why I'm playing the pink noise is I just need to check my 4 corners. This is one of the most basic tests you can do, is check your speakers. I got a text message from a buddy of mine the other day, and he was talking about, you know, something sounded weird, and I figured out I had it wrong, and the crossovers were wrong. They were going to the wrong speakers. He's like, yeah, it was the strangest thing ever. Always test. If you're using just a regular front, rear, left, right, you know, do the cross. If you're doing a DSP, turn off each channel. Make sure things are going to where they need to go. Very important. Simple balance and fader. Go to that corner of the car. Make sure you go totally to that corner of the car. If you don't, you could get some bleed through. Center it back up. Go to the passenger side. Go to the front. The speaker's playing. To the rear. The rear speaker's playing. And even though I know by process elimination this speaker should be playing next, I'm good. We need to check it because we might not be getting any audio out of it, or we might have something set wrong on the amplifier. We got sound? Yes. Center it back up. Love the center feature on the Kenwoods. Next test is polarity. We want to make sure everything's moving in the right direction. Starting with the driver's door, we're looking for 2 green flashes in a row, and we got them. Moving up to the factory tweeter, we got the 2 green flashes there. Since we're doing speakers in the rear deck, we'll test from underneath. Here we're looking for 2 red flashes because this is the back side of the speaker. We have the 2 red flashes on this one, 2 red flashes on that one. Moving on, green, green, we got green, green. Up to the tweeter. 2 in a row. All our speakers are moving the direction we need. Next we'll go through the rest, set our gains, set our crossovers, hop in, take a listen. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Little tune time playing with the radio. Of course, we're gonna break out the iTest mic just to get an idea what's going on. This has 4 tweeters up front, the 2 factory, the 2 bottom. That doesn't mean we don't want to play with it a little bit and make it sound the best that it can. Add a little bit of EQ curve to it. Now it's time to just listen to straight music and see what it does. The one thing that you always have to remember when coming back to a system like this that has had a previous stereo in it is go through all your bass and treble settings and make sure the crossovers are set to either off or to the new speakers. Typically when we get a car in, that's the first thing we do. Ozzy. Time to let Fernando take his turn and make sure that he likes the way everything is, and then we'll get it out of here. Hey Fernando, it's your turn. Okay. And like that, guys, we are done. We hope you enjoyed this little 911 rescue, whatever you guys decide to call it. If you like 911, let us know. If you think something else would be better, let us know that way too. Yep. It's up to you guys. It's always up to you guys. And with that, Fernando, if you please.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye. Say bye, Mom.
Bye-bye.